All right, we on.
Legal pad out.
We're on.
Yes, sir.
Back at it again. Back on the mic. I'm old, the futuristic baby boomer.
Lavala Harris, progressive millennial.
And today, we have a guest today.
Yes.
I'm going to let her introduce herself.
I'm Idrienne.
That's it?
Yeah. Walker. I'm from Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I went to Drexel University and I played on the field hockey team, and now I'm a prosecutor here in Maryland.
A prosecutor, counselor. All right.
Yes.
And what generational cohort do you belong to?
Of course, I'm a millennial.
Millennial. Two millennials against a
Ooh.
barely made it boomer.
Yeah,
All right.
probably on the older end and on the younger end of the millennial. I would say.
I don't know. Are you a younger millennial? Because he's an older millennial. He's old as motherfucker.
I'm older than 32 and I'm younger than 40.
Barely younger than 40. Okay, that's all right.
I'm younger than 30,
Younger than 30?
but I'm older than
You might be
26.
Gen Z.
You might be
No,
crossing the
no.
line there. You might be
You
in a different
passing.
territory.
You're Gen Z.
toe
You passing
touching. You
as
toe
a
touching.
millennial.
Wait, I used to make breakfast with some of your age.
How you
no,
mean?
millennial.
He might check your license.
Different.
Okay, that's all right.
We'll let that pass.
We'll let that pass. We'll just raise one eyebrow on you over here as we go. But look, so I do have some shit I want to talk about today, and Lavala sent something saying he wanted to talk about Elon Musk. And there was a article that we were blessed to receive from our guest millennial / Gen Zer that talked about Elon Musk talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and saying that he believes that that's racism and not being a fan of that. And I have a real problem with that, and I know you're on Team Elon. You've
sure.
always been on Team
Well,
Elon.
I hope we can at this point in time just define a couple
You want to
things.
get close to my? Oh.
I think you can be Team Elon and still agree that there's an issue with his perspective on diversity, equity, inclusion. I think, though, that you can also not be Team Elon, which I'm not. I think he's a flop, and also agree that there's an issue with diversity, equity, inclusion in his statements. But I also hope, before we speak, that we define what it means, what this term is, diversity, equity, inclusion. It's okay to disagree, but I think everybody has, varying definitions, and I think we should all be on the same page about what it means.
Okay,
Did
Miss
you just say
Lawyer.
you're a lawyer?
Okay, Miss.
Okay. So go ahead.
Well,
So,
go ahead, define it for us.
define it for us.
No, you should define it.
Oh, hell
No, you can't
no.
call. You can't put
No,
me
no,
on.
no,
That's
no,
not how
no.
this works.
Fine.
No, no, no,
If you-
no.
No,
Hell no.
because you're gonna
If you want a definition,
Go ahead, you
better
define
bring
it.
the definition.
Albert.
Yeah, oh, hell yeah. I think you should define this. What is it? No, you tell us.
Right.
And then have us looking.
I don't want to know what it is.
Yeah, no.
I think as a country as a whole, we've been pushing for a lot of things in this progressive movement, and millennials seem to be at the forefront of it, at least for a little bit. And to me, my understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion is to create a more equal playing field, something that's equal and something that is equitable. So you're not picking people that otherwise wouldn't get the job because they're not talented. But I think when you have a business and you're selling something and you want people to buy it, then it's important to have the people that are capable of doing that thing. And I think diversity, equity, inclusion is helpful because they create a way for people who otherwise would have been overlooked that should have those roles that wouldn't have been taken into consideration.
So I need to take issue with part of your premise, which is that millennials are at the forefront. Because I'm going to tell you, boomers and traditionalists have been fighting for equality and inclusion
of course,
and diversity ever since our ancestors were slaves.
Yeah,
and became free.
And I think that affirmative action is a big part of that. I guess when I talk about millennials, I think that when we speak about millennials, people always say that like millennials cry a lot and they complain a lot, and perhaps for good reason. I think that millennials having an issue with a lot of things that are happening has caused an outcry, and that also has a lot to do with social media. You're seeing what's happening around you. Companies are seeing the backlash of what happens when they are less inclusive, and so they've chosen to. But I mean, even with the repeal of affirmative action, we are clearly able to see the companies that never really cared about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they were doing it because they felt like they had to. I mean, I have numerous friends that are lawyers that tell me that they've just taken it away at their job. Like diversity, equity, inclusion, they used to send them, let's say, every year to kind of like a diversity summit, and that doesn't happen anymore. I think now we've established diversity, equity, and inclusion, or even like the purpose of affirmative action. Whether it's appropriate is a separate topic.
See, okay, and I understand. Yes, the boomer generation says that millennials cry a lot and complain a lot.
You do say.
Yeah, you do. And yes, you have reason, but I just need to tell you, the things that you cry about are not new. We had to challenge through all that shit, and we just didn't cry. See, we've had to deal with harsher. You're talking about the taking away of going to a conference on diversity. We never had that shit, right? Were you talking about they no longer give us X, Y, and Z? We never had that shit. So, look, it's not right that it's taken away, but you
I mean, is it
what are
not
we
right?
arguing here? Are we talking about the fact that diversity and inclusion should be implemented, or are we talking about Elon Musk disagreeing with it?
we're talking about Elon
what are we
Musk, a
on here right
racist
now?
and a flop.
Okay.
Damn
So
I never said.
He's a flop.
No, so let's talk about it. How do you feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I believe it should exist. I think it's a fair thing, more than a fair. I think it's something that should be implemented in all workforces, and they should take it seriously.
And what do you think about Elon Musk saying that
I think
it's
well,
racist towards white people?
let's not position me as First of all, I'm unbiased. I don't.
I'm just
Elon
asking
isn't
your
my father. I just want to make that disclaimer because you guys are like, so what do you think? I'm not Elon's spokesman.
Right.
Right.
What about your boy?
Right.
What about your boy?
But I will answer the question. I think it's necessary, absolutely necessary in the workplace. I do think that sometimes for good reasons, but also to our detriment too, we're hypersensitive. And so that is what the boomer sort of like doesn't really understand. There's a disconnection. And I think like our generation was the first generation that came around and had access to like technology. So we went from linear to exponential, and knowledge and information and all those things were at our fingertips. And we learned a lot within a short period of time. And also we demand change in a different way. So that kind of separates us anyway. But I think because of that, we also you should kick down this statue. That's racist too. Oh, this one. And we're going okay, that's enough. So that's kind of like the borderline that I think that is also in our workforces, where it's I believe diversity and inclusion should be necessary, but sometimes people kind of
you think we take it too far?
It's sometimes we might take it too far, and also it damages the system.
I'd agree.
So
I'd agree.
that's what I think.
Elon,
I'd agree. You both agree that we sometimes take the demand for diversity, equity, and inclusion too far?
Everything can be taken too far.
Perhaps maybe I'll just rephrase a little bit. It's not that I'm saying that I think we take diversity, equity, inclusion too far. I think sometimes when you fight for anything, when you fight for any type of cause, at some point you have to say, when are we done? When is this enough? When have we reached the point where we have what we want?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we go past that. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we sometimes go a bit too far. We start getting upset about things that are not actually offensive. We start having problems with things that actually shouldn't be problematic. And so then when actual racism and actual prejudice takes place, nobody listens to you. Right
it's
now,
a kid who cried wolf, or whatever this story is.
Yes, right now, if I may.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
We are having an issue. Like I remember seeing something, and it was a white woman, and she was like going on and on and on about how something was racist and incredibly problematic, and the black person was like, actually, that's not racist to me, and I'm totally fine. And this thing objectively wasn't racist, but she had read somewhere that it was. I mean, now we have this sort of idea that like if someone says that it's racist, then it is. If someone says that it hurts your feelings, then it does. And of course, it can't be true all of the time. If you have a problem with something, you have to decide. You have to say, okay, this is what I don't like. This is what I'm going to do about it. But at some point, you have to have an end.
Yeah, I get that. You know what? So for me, it seems like the end would be equality, right? A level playing field.
Which is never going to happen.
Yeah, but
if you want to have something fair, then you should go to a carnival. That's never going to happen.
See, so, okay. So
come on, man. Let's acknowledge.
No, I got
She's like...
No, but so let's probe that a minute.
Okay.
Because if the goal in diversity, equity, and inclusion is to level the playing field and to make things equal and have equality, and if you're saying we're never going to have that, then you're talking about quitting short of that. So what is the point at which? Okay. So are you good?
Let me go.
Are you good with 75%? And now we're too much if we ask for more?
I think we're talking about two different things. Like, because diversity, equity, inclusion is kind of its own thing, its own narrative. It's the idea that companies really should take into consideration what their workforce looks like and how to create a better society as a whole, how to deliver the best products to the people. It's like, this is a very, very weird example, and I don't know why it's just coming to my mind. But so my mother's a darker complexion than me, and my dad is considerably lighter than me. My mother at one point in time was going through some skin conditions, and she went to a doctor. The doctor was white, and the doctor prescribed her with this medication because he thought that it would help her in her skin condition. It actually accidentally bleached her skin, and all of her skin started to turn white. And that's because the books that the doctors had and that they were using only saw the effects on white people. He didn't know that prescribing that type of medication to my mother would change the pigment of her skin because he'd only done it on white people. So when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's taking people who would be able to provide a different type of knowledge. They're otherwise qualified, and they're almost even better for that position. Perhaps my mother should have gone to either a white doctor who has treated black patients or a black patient who would understand what she's going through. So I think that's something separate, diversity, equity, and inclusion, making it so society functions better. And then there's another side, and that side I think is more like, I don't even know that I can really conjure up the words right now, but it's sort of like, it's like we want to do this thing, you know, we want to take this action as a whole, like sort of racism as a whole, or like segregation as a whole. It's an entire concept of this like action that you want to take. And I think when we're talking about that, so separating from diversity, equity, inclusion, but sort of the idea overall that nothing in the world is equal and we need to do something about that. Like, we see that not just in race, but we also see that with people who identify differently as well. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, at what point in time have we reached it? You say that you lived in a different society from us. You know, my grandfather grew up in Lisette, Alabama, and he was treated horribly. The life that I live today, I mean, I live his wildest dreams as a prosecutor here. And he was alive when Obama became president, and like he never thought that he would ever see that happen. So just because, I mean, I would agree that just because we have made these feats, that doesn't mean that we don't have more to go. But I do think it's important to realize that I think sometimes we squabble over these tiny, tiny little things when there are much bigger things at stake. And so I think that's what Lavala is trying to say. Maybe I don't agree specifically with his examples, but I do agree with his entire concept. And the concept is that sometimes it seems like overall, all of the time, we get very upset about these small things, and then when there's a bigger issue, it's sort of like, you know, it's like the boy who cries wolf.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So okay, but I, you know, if the standard is to try to create an environment, whether it's work, whether it's in, you know, your educational environment, whatever that happens to be, where you want to.
How far does that stretch for you? How far does it stretch just for Black people? Does it also stretch
No.
for illegal immigrants?
Yes, it stretches for everybody.
What do you
Hispanic,
think
Asian,
about
illegal
immigrants that come to this country, and
if you are here,
uh-huh.
if you are in a position and you have a job, then we need to have a standard of diversity, equity, and inclusion that incorporates for everybody that is in this particular pool of individuals, whether it's employment, whether it's education, or whatever. And so until we get that, whether it's preferential treatment or just disparate treatment among some, that's a problem.
But the point is that the treatment is supposed to take people who are capable of doing the job and who otherwise wouldn't have heard about it. I was raised by my mother as a single parent, and it was very hard for her. She worked all the time. She was literally never home. I went to Bullis, which is a private school. I'm like telling all my business.
Yeah, but
I went to a private
yourself.
No,
Yeah,
but I think the point of that is I have benefited from a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The reason why
Elon Musk would say that all those need to be taken away.
he would
What-
say
is
that
that
they are
what he's
racist
saying?
against white people, and shame on anyone who uses it.
So okay, but why did he say that? I don't think did the article state
I don't
why?
know. Did you read the article?
I
Don't
didn't
get
read the
my
whole
notes.
thing, but the reason I'm asking too is because I think obviously, it's not like the media is trustworthy. I tend to obviously listen to the information and then to dissect it in the way that I see fit based on other sources that I have. I think that's how we all digest things. We can't just look at one source, but I think like I want to know what's Elon reasons for saying those things.
Okay.
Maybe you
But-
should have read the
so-
article.
But
So
if you remember, what did he say?
So here's the thing. I don't know. I don't know what Elon's motivation was in saying it,
Mm-hmm.
and the article didn't say what his motivation was in saying it. But here's the thing: if I am white
Mm-hmm.
and I have white privilege, and look, I'm not going to be the first one to say I'm going to give my privilege up.
Of course not. Yeah,
That's human nature,
of course.
right? And so if that's going to be a change,
and impossible.
Well, that's why equity
it's
has
an
to look.
immutable characteristic.
I don't know that it's impossible.
You
But what I
cannot-
do know, yeah, I'm white. If I'm white, I'm white. That ain't changing.
Right.
But the privilege can change if society changes.
I-
If there is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
The only-
Man, we started off on a heavy foot here.
To
Yeah.
create with
Okay.
a level playing field.
Right, but
All
the
right.
only thing that I have a slight worry about, again, is not diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm a Black woman. I'm probably as, you meet someone, they're like, oh, and they've like faced this adversity and faced that. Like I could fit into every category, like playing a Division I athlete and being a prosecutor and being Black and having a single parent. So I fit in all of these categories, and I have taken advantage of
every woman.
and,
The theme music, eh?
and I've taken it seriously.
You give me Candace Owens vibes.
Wow. I was gonna say Adrienne.
You give me Candace Owens.
I was gonna say Angel
I
Reese.
wouldn't do that
But
because
you like
Candace
Candace Owens.
I look nothing like her.
No, not looking.
I said
Candace
vibes.
Owens is a Republican.
I'm kidding though.
Candace,
Republican.
I
Candace
know
is
her
like
very, very
they
well.
don't like. I think
Well, I'm saying that
I'm
I
only
agree
kidding, by the
with
way.
I said I agree with diversity, equity, inclusion. You said you don't agree with it. But I remind you of Candace Owens.
And
This is
look
gonna
at
be
that.
on the record.
Just
I never
like
said that.
I got the millennials fighting against each
I
other.
never said
that's
that.
how
I give a whole
crazy it
spiel,
is.
we always got each
wait.
other's back.
But wait, no.
The only thing that I'm saying is I
Wait,
do worry
no.
about that. I worry about how far it goes. That's the only thing. I think
True.
diversity, equity, inclusion is incredibly important. So Malcolm Gladwell actually gave a talk one time, and he was kind of like talking about this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and sort of like how far it can go. And his worry, and other people have said this before also, that the way in which diversity, equity, inclusion, and these other programs have been working, some of them, is that they're sort of just accepting people blindly. And so that would mean that you would take these Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, these schools with a very good disposition in society where people, could only dream of sending their children, and you're dumbing them down. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of articles about that, like basically these people complaining that these schools are not providing the type of education that they used to, and they're changing the type of coursework, and so it's creating a different type of society. I'm not saying that I agree with that, but I am curious what your opinion is about it.
Well, I say this, that, there was a movement led by, in part, Ivy League schools to make SAT testing optional because of the inherent bias in standardized testing. There's now a movement afoot led by Ivy League schools to reinstate standardized testing, which have an inherent bias. So, I guess, I'm a little conflicted on that point, because I think that the bigger issue for me is not whether they reinstate standardized testing or not. The bigger issue for me is Supreme Court decisions that say that affirmative action can't stand. That's the issue.
Right.
Because, you can whether you have standardized testing or not, having a program that allows for access to minority communities that have not been able to historically compete and give them access to education because of the fact that you're trying to make up for past wrongs is something that I think needs to be done. And taking that away is ultimately giving the haves to continue to have and the have-nots to never get.
I'm not saying...
Yeah. Well, let me just say, I think one thing, I don't really know Elon's stance on this whole thing. I think... Because I want to get on another topic on Elon with EVs, and we really passed about that. But
we don't want to talk about racism.
But if we know what his reason, we're obviously talking about why Elon feels this way, and I think we're
he
deep
said it's
into
racist against white people.
Well, first, I think we understand that diversity and inclusion is important. It should be implemented in the work.
And it's not racist.
Elon does
and
not
it's not
think
racist.
that.
No, this one, it's not at all.
It's
but
not racist against
we don't know
white people.
why he said what he said. I'm reading the headline, and so if someone knows, great, we can talk about that. But if not,
most people assume that it's racist towards white people wrongly, because diversity, equity, inclusion can actually include white people.
What does Elon thinks? Do we know?
But although this article, poorly written, I might add, doesn't address that, we can talk about what most people believe is that's probably what he thinks. What most people believe the problem is with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they think it's unfair. And the reason they think it's unfair is because they think they're taking these spots and they're giving them to a bunch of black people that don't deserve them, and that's not the case.
That's true.
These black people are out testing, they're outperforming their counterparts. Black people are not taking the jobs
or Hispanic
from
or Asian.
Hispanics or what or whatever from white people. They should have got those jobs in the first place, but they didn't hear about them. They didn't know about them. Like, the reason why I got my internships in undergrad was from a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And that's how I learned about Vanguard, and that's how I learned about Lockheed. Like, my mom didn't even go to college. She didn't know anything about that. So I think these programs are very important, but I think what's more important is to talk about the issues and why people find them problematic, because education as to what they are and what they can do for our society is important. So I'm not for giving opportunities to people who don't deserve them, but the people who are getting these opportunities don't not deserve them.
Right. And so I agree with that. And so to Lavala's point, he wants to pivot to the other part about Elon Musk, which is because he feels the way that because he feels
I said go ahead.
Because he feels the way that he does.
Yeah.
His company is crumbling.
It's a flop.
His company is crumbling.
I'm here. I'm like I just don't get the point. You know where we're going with it.
Yeah, okay.
I just don't.
Now we're on to
I get it.
his company is crumbling.
You want to talk about why he
potentially.
Fine.
I mean,
it's related, but go ahead.
I mean, I think, I respect people who do great things, and I think it comes with a lot of weight. And you're gonna have people who are divided. Some people are gonna like you, some people are not gonna like you. But I think overall, with Elon, really making a dent in the space frontier. The EV space.
What does that stand
like
for?
what now?
What does that stand for?
What?
EV.
Oh, electric vehicles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Solar. Just
We'll
energy,
get you
power.
in the diversity, equity, inclusion program, which will get you ready.
You know what I mean?
I
I just think that's something to admire. That's something of a great inventor. He's arguably one of the greatest inventor of our time.
No,
so,
he's not.
okay, who's your runner-up?
It's not arguable. I think that.
Well, who's your runner-up? Because I want to. If not, I'll just who.
I don't have a runner-up.
Okay.
I mean, if you talk to me next week, I'd take some time.
Or you can think about that and let me know.
I don't even have a runner-up, and it wouldn't be him.
Okay,
That's
so
how much he
you're
sucks.
just being petty, but I want to be factual. So Elon is that, right? So I'm saying people can hate him. For me, I just appreciate what this guy has done to us, the generation he's going to inspire. And for me, that's great.
But what has he done?
So
I just
okay. I'm not going to take away from his accomplishments.
Right.
He's created Tesla, the pioneer automotive avenue into the electric vehicle and climate friendly space.
Didn't he steal
by
that
creating?
idea?
Whether he stole it or not, he's the one that brought it to market. And so, and quite frankly, I'm a fan of Teslas.
Yeah.
Now, but here's the thing. What's happening now, and the relevant piece of this, is that his company is crumbling. Why is it crumbling? Because EV sales have slacked off. Why have EV sales slacked off? Because they're expensive. They're hard to get into. And people are not migrating. Now there is a consciousness that is developing around the fact that if I get an EV, I got to stop at a charging station multiple times, more times than I had to stop to get gas to charge. And when I get to the charging station, there's a line.
And then you got to wait.
And you're increasing the inconvenience factor. And people are saying, I'm not that committed to climate change. I'd rather have the convenience.
Let me just say, I really am just joking. I was joking. I know how much you love. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I'm fine. I'm just waiting to talk. But go. No, I'm just waiting to get the point in. But both, go ahead.
I just want to say, it's not that I'm a hater of Tesla. I saw your car outside. I did think it was cool. I've ridden in a Tesla. I think the idea is great. I think for me, sometimes it comes to what the principle is. Like, I remember hearing about Tesla, and it doesn't really mean very much to me if we say that he stole someone's idea. I mean, people say that about Mark Zuckerberg, whatever. It's the person that gets it to market and makes other people love it. That's the real person. However, we've all seen Hidden Figures, and so maybe there's an argument that could be made that there are people behind it that also should get some notoriety. But I do think for me the principle, the principle of the matter is very important. I hear on this podcast and people talking a lot about climate change and how important it is. And I wonder how important it is to Elon Musk. Is this something that he's doing just for money and he wants to take over the world? Or is it something that he believes in it? And if he believes in it, then why does he own so many jets? I mean, that is just puts that's a really big carbon footprint.
You have a lot of industry talking points. Sounds like someone who doesn't really know the history of Elon and what he's actually doing.
Well,
I think yeah, sure, but it would take all podcasts for one.
To tell me why he has so many jets, it would take the whole podcast.
For sure. I mean, he could possibly be offsetting his carbon footprint, but that doesn't really matter. I think what Elon has single-handedly done in this space has just the whole talking points about choose fine. If you want to hate Elon, fine. When you drive a Tesla, you just can't help but to feel the change, the difference. You have your own relationship, your own reason why you purchased that vehicle. Obviously, we can go into why Tesla is not 100% renewable because obviously the battery is made of cobalt. So this progress will being made, and nothing is perfect. But the whole idea is who else is doing it other than Elon in this space in the way that he's doing it?
BYD.
BYD. Okay, so let's focus the shift. Sure. Okay, I want to talk about BYD. Which is the reason why Tesla is now forced to change their strategy and production.
Well, why are they? Because BYD is not available in the U.S.
So the thing is, back when Elon was really struggling,
and you should probably define